Please enjoy this message from David Arquette sent in by the fabulous Carrie Tenney.
Hey Ryan, how are you? Thanks for doing the Scream podcast.
Like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
You are listening to Scream with Ryan C. Showers, the podcast for Scream fans just like you. Join Ryan every week as he takes a deep dive into the horror film series that defined the 90s and redefined the genre. Scream with Ryan C. Showers is your source for scene and quote analysis, character dissections, and the latest news about upcoming installments of the Scary Movie franchise.
I hear you like horror movies, Kirby, but do you like them as much as him?
Hey everybody, before we get started, I just want to come to you on International Women's Day, March 8th. I'm recording this. I just wanted to give a shout out to all of the women who have worked on Scream, acting, creative, however, producerial, all the women out there who support Scream and love the franchise, and especially to the queens of our franchise, Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox. I also want to say congratulations to Academy Award winner Mikey Madison for winning Best Actress, a very young actor winning for the most coveted prize of the night, really, and upsetting Demi Moore. And Demi Moore was my choice. For me, it was really important to support women of a certain age doing horror movies like Demi Moore did, especially after such a long career. But I'm really happy for Mikey Madison, and I'm proud that an actor who started out in Scream really went on to win an Oscar. I think that's very cool. So she's not the first Oscar winner in the Scream franchise. We have, of course, Anna Paquin, and we have Mary McDonald and Laurie Metcalf, who are both Oscar nominees. But she is the first one to kind of like, I mean, she has a really cool story because she got the role of Honora from Sean Baker after he saw her in Scream 5. And that was the inspiration for him to cast her and write this project for her. So very happy for Mikey and for the franchise. One last thing before we get going, just one final note. You know, I've been reflecting recently, and it just so happens to be on International Women's Day that I wanted to discuss this. You know, we are so lucky to have another Scream film in general, right? But we are so lucky to have another Scream film where Sidney Prescott is the main character. You know, I was reflecting on the discourse about around the time of Scream 6, before, you know, and after, meaning before, like after it was announced that Neve wouldn't be coming back and the filming of Scream 6, but also the reception right after. And I'm not talking about everything that happened with Scream 7. I'm talking about just the isolated period around Scream 6, aka like March through, let's just say September and even October, before anything happened with Scream 7. The discourse, in my opinion, it was really severe. You know, if you've been online, you've seen the toxic kind of things, like the Sidney story is over, ! All caps. You know, it was a lot of noise. It was really ugly, mean, and dismissive. And in my view, like now that like at the time, it was so like you were walking on eggshells as an original Sidney fan. And like we knew it was coming from like the younger crowd that didn't want their characters to be upstaged by the original characters. And on some level, I can empathize with that, but where I don't empathize is where it becomes mean and ugly and dismissive, and that's what it was. Now here we are, a year later, and Cindy's story is not over. You know, but like even so, like, you know, it's such an alien thing to me because like she has such potential. I mean, there's, you know, there are key experiences in Sidney Prescott's life as a middle-aged woman that we haven't seen yet, and that are urgent and that deserve a storyline. So, and I think that's what we're going to get with Scream 7. So I just want to say, I love Sidney Prescott. I love Neve Campbell, and #persevere. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. And in this podcast, it is where the film critic, aka my old self, meets the Scream fan, which is my new self, or my old self, my really old self. I don't know. But this podcast, I try to contribute the film critic and my past as a film critic and my love for Scream as a fan into one thing and really approach Scream in a very smart and cool way. So everybody, thank you for joining me for this week's episode. Now, I need to go through and thank everybody who supports me over at Patreon, of course, but in particular, I need to thank my Mama Ghost Faces and Daddy Ghost Faces. They include Carrie Tenney, Brett Janovich, Corey Wilson, Stevie Shears, and I need to thank my stab investors. They include Allie, Tamika Jones, Chris Beatty, David D, Garrison Nichols, Gustavo Mora, Jess Mariano, Joey Nabrini, aka The Vault, Josh Calamari, Josh Carr, Scream Queens podcast, both Josh and Justine, Kevin Abner, Mark Vieira, Philip Douglas, Quentin Harrison, Roy Garza, Sam Levy, and Michelle Visage, aka Amar Karim. I also need to thank my wonderful editor, Albert Padilla. He is the host of the Cantina Cast. Please go follow him, check him out. He is the technical producer and editor of the podcast. I need to thank TJ Jones, who is the graphic design producer of Scream with Ryan Z. Showers. And I need to thank the girl who's sitting here with me. Everybody, please welcome Ashley Summers, the creative producer of Scream with Ryan Z. Showers and the manager of Scream with Ryan Z. Showers. Hello.
Oh, hello. How are you, my dear friend?
I'm so good. I'm sitting here with you, and we're about to talk some Scream and talk some Taylor Swift.
Yes. This is a good one, too. I'm excited about this.
So every week, Ashley and I are going through and giving each episode of my show and the topic like a connective tissue to Taylor Swift. So the topic of this week's episode, this is the first of many, first of three ranking episodes. So we are going to be ranking Sidney Prescott in this episode, ranking Sidney in terms of Neve's acting, the type of storyline Sidney has, the writing of Sidney, the overall impact that Sidney leaves on the movie, how Sidney fits into every movie, the overall impression of Sidney Prescott. We are going to rank from 1 to 5. So joining me for this episode is my friend Quentin. It's a really cool conversation, so I hope everybody enjoys what Quentin and I say about Neve and Sidney. And it's also cool because this week is allegedly the last week that they're filming Scream 7. So it just makes sense that this is a week that we celebrate Neve Campbell and herself for everything that she's done to bring Scream back from the dead in a time where Scream was in turmoil. But Ashley, what are we going to be talking about in terms of Taylor Swift as it relates to Sidney Prescott?
So the song that we picked for today is called Cassandra. This is track 27 off of the Tortured Poets Department. It's part of the second album of the Tortured Poets Department, the anthology. So it was released in 2024, produced and written by Taylor Swift and Aaron Dessner. And this song is actually about Cassandra of Troy, who is, of course, I just can't believe it. It's a song about the character who Sidney played in Scream 2 in her play. Does that make sense? Yes.
And because it's been brought up on the podcast before that there is a song called Cassandra, and that's who Sidney was in Scream 2. But for me, this song goes so much deeper than just the reference. Mm-hmm. Like there are certain lines, like the way that the song starts and the way that it's something, a specific instance that she repeats over and over. I just want to know, I want to know if you also have that same thought. But Ash, so as it relates to Sidney, explain to me what you think Cassandra means.
Yeah. So in this song, it's really her discussing things of not being believed, mm-hmm. lots of betrayal and isolation, being mocked and ignored and silenced. And if you go into the actual folklore of Cassandra, she was there to warn people. Like she was given a gift and people didn't treat it properly. And I don't think there's any character that I can think of more directly that has been betrayed, not believed, been isolated, mm-hmm. been mocked, ignored, silenced, all of those things in Sidney Prescott. Yeah. It's just so perfect. And the lyrics of this song, cut you deep, no matter, everybody could find somebody in their life that they could probably relate this song to.
So the thing that's so cool about Taylor Swift and how we approach doing these songs in particular, the songs for the trio, I took this very seriously with Ashley. I was like, Ashley, in my traditional dramatic self, we've got to get this right. We have to pick the perfect Taylor Swift song that completely captures, embodies each of the trio and the essence of them. And that can be with the lyrics that Taylor is so well known for, the beat, the music, the composition, the structure, the aesthetic of the song. And I think that we actually do hit it out of the park with all three of our selections. But here, I think it's the other two are very much in your face. And this one is is slower. It's mostly done by the piano, and it feels almost like the Sidney music that Marco Beltrami wrote for Scream 1, 2, and 3. In particular, the music from Scream 3. It just feels very much in that same realm of drama and sorrow. But for me, the thing that everything that Ashley said, 100%. Everything about Scream 2, 100%. for me, how Taylor opens this the song is she's talking about this moment where she stops and freezes and she realizes something, she sees something. And I want to read the lyrics. She says, patching up the crack along the wall, I pass it and I lose track of what I'm saying because that's where I was when I got the call. And then she repeats the same phrase, except instead of, where because that's where I was when I got the call. She says that because that's where I was when I lost it all. I just feel like that is so Sidney Prescott. That is, in my mind, like whenever I hear Taylor sing those lyrics, I picture Sidney, learning that Cotton was killed on the news, where she realizes it and she freezes and she drops the dog food and she's just shaken. Whenever she's looking at Derek when his arm has been cut at the sorority house, whenever she sees Olivia being attacked, whenever Dewey calls her in Scream 5 and she says, what are you talking about? Like the moment that Ghostface is back, that feels like Sidney, and almost like this idea of like the crack along the wall and being losing track of what someone else is saying, like just freezing at like this all-knowing thing that's going to happen. I just think that is so Sidney in terms of the emotions. Ashley?
Yes. I love that line. And then I was going to bring that up. And then the other one that I love is, I was in my tower weaving nightmares, twisting all my smiles into snarls. They say what doesn't kill you makes you aware, but what happens if it becomes who you are?
Yes, because like that is Sidney's entire original trilogy arc, right? It's her being afraid of becoming her mom and being not really understanding what happened to her mom, and she's wrestling about it, and she's literally having a nightmare about her mother. That is her character arc. It's just so it's so cool that the character of Cassandra, the song of Cassandra, the weird lyrics of Cassandra intertwine with who Sidney Prescott is on such a fundamental level. So
yeah, definitely a choice that they made that makes complete sense why, when they were trying to figure out what performance was going on, why they specifically picked this character. And it's really interesting to see how all of them, how Tay-Tay and Sidney connect.
Well, and, this idea of like, that moment, the moment that I described, like the moment in all the movies where Sidney realizes it's happening again, I pass it and I lose track of what I'm saying. And that's where I was when I got the call. Because she gets the call from the killer. That's where I was when I lost it all, when she lost her mother, when she's attacked herself, when she's lost all of her friends. Like, it's just so deep in terms of who Sidney is. But I feel like this could even relate even more strongly to Scream 7, because it's coming back to her after 20 years of not being attacked, and it's coming after her family. And I think she's going to have a big moment like this when she realizes it's happening again. And I can't wait to see it.
Me too. I am so excited.
And I think that there's going to be I think she's going to be a very cautious mother. It's going to be over the top. And I think her daughter's going to be like, Mom, why are you being so overprotective? And it's going to be Sidney being Cassandra, knowing she knows, as Taylor would say, they knew, right? Sidney knew. So,
Yeah. Mom, why do you have a first aid kit in every single room in our house? And why is there like all of these really large vases that you could easily smash on someone's head?
And I just want to end this segment with talking about this one line, and it has nothing to do with Sidney. In a way it does, but there's this is a very political song in terms of like society and like noticing injustice. But there's a line where she says, when it's burn the bitch, they're shrieking. When the truth comes out, it's quiet. And I love this because it relates to internet cancel culture so much, and I relate to it myself personally because of the toxic fans of Melissa Barrera. Like, the way that they spread really negative, untrue things about me. It was so wild and crazy and loud. And then when the truth comes out, no one's saying a word. No one cares about that. They only care about the negative, loud stuff. So I love that. Ash, where can they find you and your store?
You can find me on Instagram at squirrelandspud9 is my Instagram there. My store is connected. And if you can, definitely leave a comment and let me know that you came from the pod. I'd love to follow you back.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ash. Hey, everybody. Just wanted to remind you that next month, a huge shakeup is coming to the podcast. Instead of offering one of the episodes on Tuesday every month as bonus Patreon content, there will be 4 episodes of Scream with Ryan C. Showers released to the public as normal. However, in addition, the new bonus content for the Patreon subscribers of Scream with Ryan C. Showers will be audio commentaries. Now, I'm going to release this on probably like the second or third Thursday of every month. It will be me, just me, giving an audio commentary as I watch a movie that's related to Scream or the Scream movies themselves. So it's imagine like you're sitting down to watch like a filmmaker's commentary with that type of like intellect and like smart analysis about the movies that you're watching. That is kind of what the energy I want to bring to the audio commentaries. And I'm going to have a team helping me with research. It's going to be a really cool thing. So the idea would be to press play on the audio commentary of me, of the podcast, while pressing play on the TV screen with the movie. But also I'm trying to design them so that you can listen to them in the car without having to watch the movie, that it would still be compelling and captivating, and you'll be able to follow what I'm saying, even if the movie isn't playing in front of you. So this is a cool thing to be doing for the podcast. I love the idea of revamping the podcast and doing something different. The first audio commentary is going to be for The Craft. That's going to be released on April 17th. Then in May, it will be Final Destination, then Scary Movie, which is so much fun. I can't wait for that one. Then we're going to do in the summer, Halloween H2O. I Know What You Did Last Summer, the original Halloween. Then after we build up to it, we will release audio commentaries for Scream 1, 2, and 3 before Scream 7, then 4, 5, and 6 after Scream 7, and then we'll continue on with Scream-adjacent movies like The Faculty, Urban Legend, other franchise horror movies like A Nightmare on Elm Street, and yada yada. And so yeah, it'll be very fun. I'm really excited for it. And please subscribe to the Patreon to support me, to support the commentaries, to support my team that is newly assembled and doing a great job helping me keep the podcast thriving. So in order to get the commentaries, all you have to do is subscribe to the lowest tier. But if you would like to participate in the podcast in a deeper way within the community coming on the show, please subscribe at the higher tiers. So, but again, April 17th, be there or be square. I'm so excited about the audio commentaries, and I hope everybody enjoys them. Hello, everybody. We are now talking to my friend Quentin. Hey, Quentin.
Hey, it's good to be back. How are you?
I'm well. It's so nice to see you.
Yes, likewise.
All right. So Quentin, tell me, you haven't been on the podcast since the Alien episode, right? Or were you on at some time, or maybe a group episode here or there?
I believe the Alien episode was the last one, though I think the last like family style piece I was on was the Taylor Swift one.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for coming. We have been wanting to do an episode about Sidney Prescott for a long time. And specifically, you wanted to discuss her performances in Scream 4 and 5. And I was thinking about it, and like I really wanted to do this episode because so much of my coverage on this podcast has been about the original trilogy, and specifically Scream 3, of course. But Quentin and I have talked about doing this Scream 4 versus Scream 5 Sidney episode because they're both separate from the trilogy and they're both doing two different things. So this has always been in the back of my head. However, here we are doing these ranking episodes. So I have dedicated the month of March to the trio. And this month we have done like what I've termed ranking Dewey Riley, ranking Gale Weathers. And now today we are ranking Sidney Prescott finally. So we are going to rank her 5 performances, her 5 character arcs, everything Sidney. So not just Neve's acting, but more so, everything that encompasses Sidney. So Neve's acting, the writing of Sidney, the way she's used, the look, the vibe, the arc, the intensity, the impression that she leaves, everything is wrapped up into one bundle here for ranking her today. So Quentin, you excited?
Oh, of course I am. I love Neve Campbell. I love Sidney Prescott, the greatest final girl of all time. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who could really disagree with that. The proof is in the pudding.
Well, a lot of people say Laurie Strode, but I think that Sidney, I think that they have it going on. So, but before then, so we are going to be talking about Sidney and her 5 appearances that we've seen that are public knowledge. But more importantly, before we get to that, let's talk Scream 7. So I know that like you are. I'm very excited for Scream 7. I'm very hopeful. I'm very optimistic for Scream 7. And you, whether it's Scream 7, whether it's the Buffy reboot, which you can feel free to share some thoughts there too if you'd like. But you are a very cautious person about upcoming things that could possibly impact franchises that we love in a negative way. How would you describe your evolution with Scream 7?
I mean, at the core, I'm still excited because it's just a great franchise. I think both in horror and out of horror, it's sustained that level of quality in terms of casting, writing, that kind of stuff, and just popular culture relevance and impact is rare. But I think I've had to, I won't lie. The turning point for me was Patrick Dempsey not coming back. I was really, really crushed because I like Patrick Dempsey, and, you know, I can't speak on any of the stuff in relation to pay and all that. That's all conjecture, but they weren't able to get him. And while I think the gentleman who they're bringing in to be the next Mark will do well, it's disappointing. And I think for me, I've had to just step away from it for a little bit. It's kind of what I'm doing. I'm still going to be seated. I'm going to be paying, you know, my ticket to go, and I'm going to buy it on Blu-ray when it's out, you know, on hard copy. But it just has been interesting to watch, I think, how the press and certain segments of the fan community have dealt with this. Like, I think there was a little bit of denial, like watching people sort of say, well, they didn't say it was going to be Mark Kincaid. And I'm like, y'all, come on now. But let's, you know, but I get it. So everyone has to deal with these things in their own way. So my way of sort of dealing with it is, you know, I read these things, and this goes for the Buffy reboot as well. I read it, I see it. I'm like, this is interesting. You know, we've got a few principal ingredients that are present. That's great. But ultimately, you're sort of stacked up against, you know, what has come before within, you know, the franchise. And then also dealing in an environment where we are now culturally, where I think there is a streak of, to be quite frank, social nihilism, where people just want to sit in a place and collectively not just tear down things, but tear at them. And I'm not really interested in that. I can't. So my thing is just to kind of silo, and then when it's available for consumption, consume, and then give my opinion at that time.
So I want to push back just a little bit. So I appreciate you being cautious and circumspect about Scream 7, because you're right. It could be, you know, there is a chance that it's not good. You know, there is a chance that Kevin doesn't know what he's doing as a director. But I think that you're being, I don't know. I think that you're being a little, I don't think you're giving the ingredients as much credit as they possibly deserve. And I understand where it's coming from, and I understand and I respect your opinion here. But I do think that Patrick Dempsey coming back isn't the end all be all. You know, I think if this were Courtney Cox, I think we would be having a much different conversation. But Patrick Dempsey, you know, I think that they tried really hard. I think that if I had to take a guess, you know, my perspective would be that Spyglass, Neve, Kevin, they wanted him. They approached him in good faith. And I don't think that Patrick was necessarily negotiating in good faith. And it does, you know, for fans of Scream 3, which we both are, because you are a Scream 3 person, it hurts. It's sad that Radio Silence ran around, you know, screaming like, you know, little kids, like how giddy and excited they were that they did this cool thing, you know, that they, you know, shoved this in our face like, ooh, she's with Mark Kincaid, and gave us this unfair expectation, and gave the put Patrick in an uncomfortable position, put Spyglass in an uncomfortable position to meet this expectation that, you know, they probably that was difficult to meet, obviously, because it didn't happen. But I don't think, you know, it sucks that Radio Silence did that, and I blame them first and foremost. I think that they were very haphazard with the way that they made their Scream movies, promoted their Scream movies, even on this show, right? I think that they were immature, and I think that everything Patrick is a result of them. Can I ask, so what about Patrick not coming back do you see as such a rain cloud?
Well, for me, I think continuity is a big thing for Scream.
Yeah.
I mean, even having the twins back, I think is great, because I love, Mindy and Chad, but then of course, because they're not attached to the whole Core 4 thing, and that's a whole other separate thing. But I'll say this just before I get to the other point. Having Kevin on board, and Neve and Courtney, I'm confident that they're going to do a good film. Like, I don't think like I think if nothing else, we're going to see more of a return to a more consistent level of quality that wasn't as present in the previous film. Even though there are elements of the sixth film that I can enjoy, it was the weakest of the series so far. So that I'm not worried about. But I think just in terms of the lore and things that I've come to personally enjoy, it was a bit of a blow, but I'll be fine. Like I said, I'm still going to be seated. I'm still going to do my part to promote it and support it. And then obviously when it comes out, buy it. So that's just, you know, my perspective on it. And I don't want to dampen anybody else's good time. I think that, I just think sometimes like the noise around these projects, at least for me in the last year, with everything else going on that's also noisy in the world, I just have to like back up and retreat, because I don't want Scream to be something that I don't enjoy. I want that to be something that I enjoy. So for me, you know, I've shared that with you because we're friends, separate. Like we have a friendship, you know, outside of the context of the podcast. So we've spoken about it. And, So yeah, that's just my perspective. But I hear what you're saying, and I think it's going to be fine in the end.
It's good to have expectations in check. And like, let's be frank, it's good to hold these people accountable, right? We were in some essence promised Patrick Dempsey. And I don't, again, I blame radio silence for that. I don't blame Spyglass or Neve for that. And if the failure of him, it's a bit of a downer, but what are you going to do? Regardless though, so I am excited to be moving forward into this new era with you as a friend, because not only for Scream 7, but in the return of Neve and Courtney, right? But also Buffy is coming back. And it doesn't sound like Buffy Summers is going to be the main character of the Buffy reboot, despite the very initial reports. So there you are right to be skeptical. We're probably getting a requel of Buffy. And Buffy is something that means the world to you, means the world to me, means the world to so many people in the Patreon, in the fandom, our people, like if that makes sense, the people who were kind of born in the 90s and nurtured on 90s content. But I still, whenever the show comes out, I still would love to do weekly recaps of the episodes, and just have them as a part of the main show. I'll do maybe 45 minutes on Scream, 45 minutes on the new Buffy episode. So I'm extending the olive branch to you. That is something that we can do when Buffy comes out.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to check it out, and I'm one of the Buffy fans. I have the comic book series that ran, because I'm a comic book guy as well. So I read seasons 8 and 9 and 10 and all that stuff, and Angel, The Fall. And I think, but again, that's another thing. I'm actually more confident in Scream than I am in Buffy, not because I think the director, whose name escapes me, can't do it. Yeah. And obviously Sarah, who I just love, Sarah Michelle Gellar in everything. I think she's continues to be a very underrated actress. I haven't seen her yet in the new Dexter prequel thing, but I hear she's excellent. But, I feel like that's another show where it's so airtight.
Yep.
Because it produced such a successful spinoff that was directly tied. We're talking about the Buffy verse. This isn't just, and I also think, and you and I have said this, and this is something, and I say this with all due respect to Mr. Evan Ross Katz. I think there are people like him and stuff. It's a dialogue I would like to start. People are entitled to their opinions, but I don't care for the narrative that Buffy was only good for its first 5 seasons. I think that we can acknowledge that there are other difficulties and things to navigate, but there was a lot of great stuff that came out of the 6th and 7th season. And I'm also for all of the great people, Druzy Greenberg, Tim Minier, but I think he did more stuff on Angel, Marty Noxon and Douglas Petrie, all the great writers who were very instrumental in helping Joss Whedon achieve his vision. And though Joss Whedon very problematic, Joss Whedon was a genius in what he brought to the show. And I don't know if we can create that kind of show without that kind of zip, because for all of his stuff, and this is not excusing any of Joss's behavior, but that was an integral part of what made the show work. That mixture of drama and horror and, supernatural, science fiction, horror, but with that said, I still like to give things a chance. So I can't wait to see it. I'm going to be seated. I'm going to support it, and give it a fair shake. And I would love to discuss it with you or anyone else. And again, you've fostered a great community of people who can sit down and have constructive conversations about these kind of things. Or just like I tend to just sit there and sort of read what people think. And then I'll have separate conversations in private about my perspective on a particular subject.
Well, and so here's the thing. I actually think you're completely right. I think if I was to say my confidence of Scream 7 versus a Buffy reboot, I'm going with Scream 7. If you think about it, you have Kevin Williamson, which as the director, as the co-writer, as the rewriter, of the script. You have Neve Campbell returning as the lead. You have Courtney Cox returning to a place of prominence after Scream 6 screwed her over. You have the twins coming back from Scream 5 and 6. Your Scream is kind of starting in a deficit, in my opinion, going from Scream 6 to whatever Scream 7 is going to be. There's obvious improvement. There's consistency from 5 and 6 pulling it along. It's a return to form of Sidney Prescott. All of that is pushing in the right direction, right? And it's something emotional. It's about her family. Buffy, again, all due respect to everybody involved, and I am looking forward to it. I'm excited to see it back. I'm excited to see it have new life. I have questions, I don't necessarily want Buffy to just be, what Sarah Michelle Gellar was in the show Wolfpack, where she was a very, very supporting character and has maybe a few big scenes in the finale. Like that's not what I want. And I understand Sarah may be in a play. Who knows? The problem is, I don't know. Is it the studio who is imposing this on Buffy that Sarah can't be the lead again? Or is it Sarah saying, I don't want to be the lead again? If it's Sarah saying, I don't want to be the lead again, then we have to live with it. But if it's the studio saying, you're old, we need young blood, that pisses me off. And again, it's the requel of it all. Why dangle the new story in front of us when we want the old story, right? So I don't know. It's complicated. I'm excited for it, but I think Scream 7 is going to be a great film. I think Scream 7 is going to be one of the best movies in the franchise. I can't say that I think the Buffy reboot is going to be that much better than a lot of the other shows Sarah has put out in the past couple of years, if that makes sense. If she is going to be taking such a backseat, and I don't think that Chloe Zhao, who is great. I love Nomadland. I think it's a beautiful movie. I think she's a great filmmaker. Is Chloe Zhao going to direct all of the episodes? What is is she going to be the showrunner? Can she do that Joss Whedon type of dialogues, that matches the original show? I don't know, all of this is yet to be seen. So I'm going in with an open mind, but I think that there is much more potential for Buffy to get it wrong than right. And here's the other thing. Buffy is the type of thing that if you don't hit bullseye, it will show that it will limp along, if that makes sense. The reception won't be kind if it's not 110% perfect. It's just the type of thing that it is. Unlike Scream, which, we've survived, a couple of Scream movies that haven't been the same as the original trilogy, and that's fine. But, I don't know. So that's my perspective. And also, I really don't like Evan Ross Katz. I'll just say it out loud. I don't like the way that he talks about season 6 of Buffy. I think it's really rude. I think it's petty. I think it's mean-spirited. I think it's, it's his opinion, whatever. But, and maybe this is how some people feel about me in Scream 6, but I just feel like he's obnoxiously rude in terms of in the imposition he puts on people about about season 6 and 7, and tries to taint it in a way and almost rewrite history and facts through his opinion. Whereas I kind of just give my opinion about Scream 6, and I can still, tip my hat.
But you can't remove the film from where it is. The film is out. It's made its impact connected to the larger story. And I just feel that as someone who actively watched the show, Buffy went off the air the day before I walked for my senior year, for graduating from high school. So that episode, that season, both of those seasons, were important to me. And I just feel like, and a lot of people have been vindicated because critics and things who might have been mixed on it at the time have since come back around. And Sarah was always uniformly fantastic, but I think she gave some really great performances in those seasons. And I think it stretched the character. I think there's a lot of infantilizing of Buffy's character and of the show, where people want to keep the show in one particular box. And again, I think that's a part of the problem with what they're trying to do. And I think just with all of the other drama to it, it's one of those things that the only way I think this would have worked for me was if it was an animated series, because it's a matter of what's plausible. And because of just, we'd love to see what's going on with Spike and Angel, but we can't because their characters are immortal. But James Marsters and David Boreanaz, and this is no disrespect to them, who are great actors, they're, like you said, they're older. So how do you pick up from where we left off in Buffy season, not only Buffy season 7, but Angel season 5, which is what closed the Buffyverse 21 years ago formally. So, but again, all that said, Mr. Katz is entitled to his opinion. And as with anyone,
But I think a point that you were trying to make too is Evan Ross Katz tries to impose this idea that 6 and 7 are illegitimate seasons, that they don't actually belong in Buffy. They don't that they aren't as concrete to the story or as important or as good as 1 to 5. Like that is the main show, and 6 and 7 are just junk. I guess
I should clarify just to make sure people who are hearing this. A big part of one of my reticence with this is that I feel like people are trying to sort of have Buffy be a do-over, or to capture like that infantilized window of what Buffy was between maybe seasons 2 through 5 or 3 through 5 or whatever it was, or, well, everyone's going to skip over 4, which is a shame because 4 is a great character building season. And I think Buffy is all 7 seasons. It's all 5 seasons of Angel. It's the whole of it, which is what makes it so beautiful in all of its complexity. And I think if you take that out, you miss that. And I think that's one of the things I haven't liked about some of what I've seen around the reboot discussion or this new is that it's sort of like, let's just keep it in this box here. And I'm like, well, I want to see Sarah's character tackle interesting things, not just her kind of being, in miniskirts in high school perpetually or whatever it is, or in that sort of mindset. And she just never grows. So,
right.
But that's my 10 cents or 2 cents. I've ranted and raved long enough. So all love and respect everybody.
Well, let's move away from Buffy and into Scream. The one thing that I love about Scream is that Neve Campbell is the most professional person when it comes to discussing her films. Like a lot of toxic fans, like I think, if you're going to Neve Campbell, if you're going to Courtney Cox and you're asking them to, if you're demanding them to give you how they rank the franchise like we do as fans, I think that's flat out toxic. Like I think it's unprofessional too. So that's why I've always really respected Neve, because she doesn't play into these like fan wars. Like she's very respectful. She's like, every time she's asked this, she says, I enjoyed working on all of the films. So yeah, I liked working on this one. This was fun. That is how it should be. I think that once artists put art out into the world, it is the world's, you know what I mean? And then when you play these games, so Neve Campbell never played these games in terms of, she was forced to do a ranking once, and it was a very uncomfortable thing if you watch the video, and she comes out with a very vanilla thing, but it's whatever. However, so going from that, Neve, we are not Neve Campbell, so we can, we're going to be giving our rankings on Sidney Prescott. As I said, it's everything Sidney, her performance, the acting, the character writing, the construction, whatever. So, Quentin, let's kick it off. What is your Sidney ranking? We're going to go through, just give our ranking, like the numbers, and then we'll go film by film. So, how would you rank Sidney Prescott?
I wonder if it's going to be it's going to be slightly similar to my Scream ranking, but oh boy. I'm probably going to go with 1, 3, 2, 4, 5.
1, 3, 2, 4, 5. Okay, so if you swap out 1 and 3, that is my ranking. And I took notes today to prepare for the podcast. And for Scream 3, I wrote non-negotiable best Sidney, and then there's Quentin negotiating it. So let's it'll be fun for a discussion here. So my ranking, and this is actually very difficult because the last ranking episode I did, which was the Gale one, my ranking changed in real time in terms of like on the podcast. Like it was different from whenever I first did it at the beginning until the end. So that being said, my ranking for Sidney, because like I've been flip-flopping 2 movies in the middle, I don't know what to do, but here it is. So I would go Scream 3, Scream 1, Scream 2, Scream 4, Scream 5. So basically we're the same except 1 and 3 are flopped, right?
Yeah.
So let's dig into it. Let's just go chronologically. I think that would be best. Just kind of build with the characters. So you and I both put Scream 1 first or second place. So near the top, arguably her best or her second best. And I actually think that like if you were to survey the crowd, I think most people would put those. I mean, it's hard. I think Sidney in each of the movies had each film performance has a super strong fan base. I think like in my head, I can, as somebody with the Scream podcast and knows a bunch of people's tastes, I can probably say 5 different people who rank each of these movies as their favorite Sidney, which I think is really cool. So let's start with Scream 1. And I think that Sidney in Scream 1, she often gets a lot of praise and credit because people see her as like very 90s, from the look, the haircut, the clothes. But also I think that the thing that makes Sidney Prescott so great in Scream 1 is she redefined what a final girl could be, because there was a very specific image of a final girl from the 70s with Jamie Lee Curtis through the 80s, where the feminism is described in a way that only goes so far. In terms of like, there's still an element of like damsel in distress, despite having a little bit of ferocious ability to fight back. Whereas Sidney, she's a completely different type of person. She's very smart, very clever, just to speak with and talk to, but she's also very deep. Like, this is something that I don't think a lot of final girls had before Sidney, which is this like depth of trauma and backstory and a whole like other hidden journey inside that she is on, and that demons that she's fighting that are separate from the literal demon of the killer who's stalking her. So I think that is kind of what Scream 1 Sidney, why she's so special is because of the backstory with her mother and her trauma, and from witnessing her mother's death and the fallout of that, the trial that she went through with Cotton Weary and Gail Weathers. And so on top of her own attack, she's still searching for answers about her mother. And those two things in concert, I think, really make Sidney very special. In addition, like, she is someone who's very tough, smart, very self-reliant, and very aware. And I think that, like, with Scream 1, I don't think this can be said for all of the Scream movies with Sidney. I think I can only be said for Scream 1 and Scream 3. Sidney is a completely different person from the very first time we see her in the movie to the very last time we see her. Like, there is almost like a self-actualization or a growth that happens that is so distinct that she is a completely different person from the bedroom scene through the time where she shoots Billy in the head at the very end. So, and the last thing I'll say is, like, another way I see Sidney in Scream 1 and Neve's acting is, I mean, it's a very intense, emotional performance. I think that for me, I think the acting is stronger and more practiced and more cultivated in Scream 3. But with Scream 1, there's a breaking of the innocence of Sidney Prescott that Neve gets to act and chew the heck out of. It's very intense. So I think when you combine the incredible deep writing of Sidney on multi layers, in addition to the opportunity for intense acting, I think that Sidney in Scream 1 does deserve to be my second place, anyways, and I guess your first place. So Quentin, take it away.
Well, I mean, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I mean, or I think Sade, one of my favorite groups, says it best: never as good as the first time. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other moments with Sidney, because there's so much with Neve's performance of that character through the films that are significant. But I think, and this is with respect to, Jamie Lee Curtis and Heather Langenkamp. And I even think she tends to be left out more so because she was more of an adult, Sigourney Weaver, and because there's the whole science fiction element, so overlapping with the horror. But to me, when we did that episode about Alien and Scream, I think that the link that puts Sigourney and Neve in my mind is just seminal performances of what they did for the genre and what they did for their franchises and for the film, is that they bring a very humanizing, real quality and believability to the role. And watching Neve Campbell, who had already shown so much promise in Party of Five and The Craft, lay that groundwork and continue to stretch herself, is a really, really beautiful thing. And even though I've seen that movie tons of times, I saw it as a kid at 11 years old in the theater. I'm going to be 40 in two and a half weeks. It still feels just so refreshing every time I see it, just watching her work. And she really humanizes the character and she humanizes the film. And I think that's really what has kept a lot of people, for the most part, whether they want to admit it or not, that human heart to the franchise. That's what has kept people coming back, because we care about her character. We want to see how she's going to grow, change, and evolve and meet the moment. And watching her do that across all these films has been great. But seeing that groundwork be laid, because you, to be honest, my personal favorite performance will always be 3. But I had to
cut again. Why not put 3 first? And we have the same ranking, Quentin. Do it.
In this instance,
I'm bullying you.
No, I really want to give that credit to her and Kevin and Wes, and what the groundwork that they laid, like that foundation of the character is just so seminal in the film. I remember just watching her when she has her first phone call, and the way she just kind of is, she goes from kind of like flippant to kind of briefly insecure, strong. And then that scene where he says, if you hang up on me, you'll die just like your mother. All of the emotion is conveyed in her face. And then when she's like, F you, you cretin. it's intense. It's like, you feel it. I just get goosebumps talking about it. And, she just keeps that energy throughout. And, it's really impressive to see. So you got to have the foundation of the house, and Scream, her performance, that she laid the foundation for all of her other performances, amazing as they are to come.
So basically Quentin's saying he prefers the vanilla cement that is the foundation of a house, and I prefer the bougie walls and chimney. So, which is
You're so funny.
So, okay. So, so I love Sidney in Scream 1. I actually used to think that Drew Barrymore is the MVP if I had to do my top 5 performances of Scream 1. I have never done this episode, but if I would have done this back in 2021 when I started the podcast, I would have put Drew at number 1 and then Neve at number 2. If I was doing it today, it'd be swapped. How would you do it?
Well, about the same, but Drew, I think I always say the opening credit performances are always very different. And they're their own kind of thing. And Drew's a talent in and of herself. And what she did for that, that was, you want to talk about a culture shifting moment. I think that's one of the most important pieces of cinema from that decade. And I think for the horror genre, and it's still jarring. Like, I still kind of go like this. I cover my face when she's hanging from that tree. It's an intense sequence. It's really, Drew sold it so well. So we love Drew.
All right. So Quentin, are you sticking with putting Scream 1 up front?
I am. Gotta give credit for the groundwork.
Okay. So, wow. I did, if I, okay. I'm just teasing.
You're okay.
Okay. We're being refined. I'm being polite. I'm being nice. Okay. Now, so Quentin ranks Scream 1 at number 1, and number 1 for Neve. I rank it at number 2, which is fine. So now we're going to move on to Scream 2, and we both rank it at number 3. So kind of dead in the middle. And this is an interesting one because I actually think that Scream 2, Neve's acting is just slightly better than Scream 1. I think that from the time of that year that passed, from filming Scream 1 to Scream 2, whether it was Party of Five, whether it was all the other acting opportunities that she had, I think Neve grew as an actress. I think over the original trilogy, her acting ability and capabilities change radically and improve radically and get deeper radically. And I think there's a big shift from 1 to 2. Like, even if you just look at the plain finale of like Scream 1 and her acting there versus the specific choices she makes in the finale of Scream 2, I think that there is a big difference for the better. So I think her acting is better in Scream 2. However, I don't think Sidney's writing in Scream 2 is as special as it is in Scream 1. I think that, in some ways, I love the writing in Scream 2. I think that having Sidney in college is wonderful. I think that Scream 2 shows her personality really, really well. But I think the writing's just a bit lighter for her. I think that if they would have focused more so on the theater aspect and like her major and like who she is, rather than doing like the college-y type stuff, I think it could have possibly, hopped over Scream 1 for me. The acting's better, but the writing is not. So it kind of pulls it back behind Scream 1, whereas Scream 1 has the really great writing and great acting, if that makes sense. So, but at the same time, like, I don't know, part of acting and part of having a great character is showing that personality, because there's so much trauma that Sidney's going through in Scream 1 and Scream 3. Scream 2 is the only time we actually really get to know kind of how Sidney is on a day-to-day basis, how she is outside of an emergency, like her sense of humor, how she interacts with her friends, how she interacts with her boyfriend when there isn't some trauma that's ailing her. And it's hard because, in Scream 2, she's also going through this paranoia, which again, that gives Neve a lot to play with. And I think that's very beneficial. I just don't think that the storyline in Scream 2 is as deep as Scream 1 or Scream 3 in terms of the opportunities that it allows her. However, again, Neve does get some really juicy stuff in Scream 2 that almost feel like catered to do for an actor's set piece, right? Like, in terms of like the Cassandra talk with Gus, like that is a moment that is made for like an Oscar clip, right? The way that she's framed, the dialogue, the way that how Wes directs her to say these lines with such intensity. the looks she gives in the cop car scene, the reaction shots, very, dramatic, very emotion filled, very laser focused on what she's doing. And I think that her acting in the finale is so good. Derek's death, I think, is one of her best moments of acting in the franchise. So, a look is, and, a cry is worth 1,000 words. So, I love her in Scream 2. I think that she is just a bit weaker here compared to Scream 1, just because I think the college writing stuff is a bit meh compared to the Scream 1 storyline, where she's kind of dueling the first attack of Ghostface and struggling with the Maureen's first year anniversary. And then again, everything in Scream 3 just kind of blows it all out of the water. So I don't know. Quentin, what do you think?
I think we're always operating from the benefit of hindsight with these films, because we have to keep in mind, obviously they wanted the films to go on and continue to be successful, but I don't think any of us thought Sidney Prescott will become what she became. So with that said, I think that for any of the weakness, as you mentioned in the writing, because keep in mind, Scream 2 in my traditional Scream ranking is actually second to last. It's like right before 2 or right before 6, because the third act is it just kind of falls apart to me for a little bit. No shade to the Mrs. Loomis lovers out there. What I love about it, and what elevates it above 6, is that there are those human moments. It's not just going from set piece to set piece. There are all these really great interconnected human moments that make it work. And there are many characters who are helping drive those human moments, but Sidney's human moments really do push it forward. And I also like the duality of Sidney's character, which is really brought to the forefront, because here you have this person who is trying to live her life post-trauma and come through it, and the trauma still comes upon her again in her inner circle. So she's wanting this privacy, but then there's also this public aspect to her, because she wants to be, of all things, an actress, a theater actress, which is different than maybe like a traditional Hollywood actress, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's still public facing, so you would think she want to retreat. So that duality of watching her try to sort of be like, this awful thing happened to me, but I'm not going to let it define my life. And watching her try to struggle with what that means in the day-to-day life of what she's experiencing in the film is a really beautiful thing. From the Gus conversation to the Cassandra Aria bit to, I think, the conversation she has with Derek, Dewey, Randy, Hallie. I really actually like her friendship with Hallie. I think it allowed her to grow in a different way that obviously I think that we love Rose McGowan, but I think Tatum was of its time. So it's just a great performance. I think it builds on that foundation of the first one and takes it forward. And I think for me, why I have it up so high is because it's the duality that it brings out, that Neve Campbell brings out in Sidney Prescott's character throughout the film, that it makes it stick out for me.
And like everything that you said is 1000% true. And it's the reason why I think Sidney Prescott has almost like the perfect character arc in the original trilogy. Like there is what the building of 1 to 2 to 3, this chapter that bridges 1 to 3 is really important. Like if they wouldn't have gotten 2 right, 3 wouldn't have made sense, and 3 wouldn't be so satisfying. Like when we see her, crying for Dewey in the Stab 3 set, when we see her opening the gate at the end of Scream 3, like those moments wouldn't be so powerful if not for Scream 2. And also like when we think about Scream 3 and the way that Roman plays with her mind with the voice changer, all of that groundwork, that is successful because of what Scream 2 does here. Scream 2, we see paranoia in Sidney in a way that I don't even think Scream 1 fully achieves, in terms of the way that Sidney doesn't trust Derek, and she kind of goes back and forth. In terms of like, yes or no, is he a good guy, bad guy? Like it makes so much more sense for us because we lived through Scream 1 with her. And I think Neve does such an effective job at communicating that paranoia, that paranoia that's so obvious, and that paranoia that we also feel because we saw it from Scream 1 and we know everything that she's gone through. And the sad thing about Sidney in Scream 2 is she is really, really trying her best to put the right foot forward and move on in the best way possible, where she isn't burdened by the trauma of the past. And it's just, it follows her just like Cassandra. It's her fate. And that's what's so beautiful about her in Scream 2. Even if, some of the college stuff, like the sorority sisters and, the cafeteria, blah, blah, like, it's cute, whatever. But like, I think that it's still a really great performance. It's a great piece of writing. I just think that it's not as clearly defined as it could be as it is in Scream 1 or Scream 3. Anything else you want to add, Quentin?
No, I mean, I just think, again, it was just the continuing layering of the character. And I think it just got an even more richer, lush portrayal of Sidney Prescott, and Neve Campbell, again, she did her thing.
Right. Like in a way, like, and again, I want to reference, like I mentioned, like the Cassandra talk, Derek's death, the cop car scene, like those moments of Sidney, even like her reaction to Cotton in the library when she's like being pushed down the steps in a way. I feel like if Neve Campbell would have acted those scenes, Scream 1 Neve, they would not be as cultivated and perfected as they are in Scream 2. And it's her evolving as an actress, right? So I love to see that. So it's a wonderful performance. So, and again, the perfect bridge between 1 and 3. So, and now let's talk about Scream 3. So you rank it second, I rank it first. As I said, it is non-negotiable. So non-negotiable best Sidney, in my opinion. The best emotion, it's her apex climactic moment. Everything in Scream 3, every scene that Sidney has is completely and utterly focused on the trauma that she has with the past Ghostface killings, of course, and what she's learned from those and how she's internalized those and what she thinks is the right thing to do based on her past with Ghostface. But also she is still plagued by her mother because it's also, her mother is intertwined with the attacks that have happened to her. So, I think that Sidney, the way that Scream 3 communicates it is she is more, traumatized and bothered by the fact that she has all these unresolved issues regarding Maureen and her past and not really understanding who her mom was. So I think that's very deep. And that is like the thesis for her character arc in Scream 3. And almost every single scene, every set piece, every moment can be tied back to that thesis of Sidney and her unresolved issues with Maureen a la Ghostface. And it's an amazing arc, and the gist of it is, Sidney believes that in order to protect herself, she thinks hiding away and putting up barriers and putting herself in the position to be as protected as possible is the answer. And she's so sure of that. And it's almost made her cynical in the way that she goes over the top to protect herself in terms of, she's thinking how to be 3 steps ahead of the killer who's 2 steps ahead of everybody else. And that's what I think is so cool about Sidney in Scream 3 is that how prepared she is, how thoughtful and how strategic she is in every decision she makes, because she's been here twice before and she knows better and she's smarter, and that's why she's able to defeat Roman. And it's such a close call between that final fight between Sidney and Roman, of course. But the arc of the movie and what Sidney has to do to change and overcome her trauma is she has to punch through those fears and the trauma she has in order to move on. And how she has to do that is she has to choose to leave the barriers she's created. So, again, the whole movie, she has gone above and beyond to make sure she's protected, to make sure that she's isolated, to make sure that she's either, in public eye, whatever, in the police station. And at the end of the day, she herself has protected, her safety, but she has to choose to leave to save her friends and to face this, and I think making that choice is what allows her to not only discover these facts and what she needs to, but allows her to have the moment of triumph and kind of overcome all of the hardship that she's had thus far. And all of this is communicated through Neve's acting, the dialogue, the visuals that Wes has in the direction. Like, for instance, the motif, of Sidney walking with the dog at the beginning, locking the gates very tightly, coming back, locking up her doors. The same scenario is repeated at the end with a different outcome. And it's again, I think what Wes Craven does a lot with Sidney in Scream 3 is he communicates a lot through visual language in a way that I don't even think that he did in Scream 1 and 2. It's very symbolic. It's very beautiful. It's very show, not tell, which I think is lovely and awesome. But then in addition to that, you have for instance, the nightmare scene, so symbolic that, Maureen is the thing that's haunting her. And she's worried about, oh, you're just like me. You're just like me. And then who pops up is Ghostface, completely symbolic of Sidney's trauma and how she sees her mother. And of course, Neve brings that to life with the most beautiful acting. And it's just so funny to me because everything with Sidney kind of goes back to the first movie. And like to go back to what you're saying, Quentin, that groundwork that was laid. Everything is about her house. Maureen's murder was there. Her first attack was there. Her memories of Billy, the guy who took her virginity and betrayed her in this horrible way. All there, that was the beginning for her, and she still hasn't seemed to move past it. And that is what Scream 3 shows us through the Sab 3 set, through the nightmare, through whatever else. And I love the fact that the voice changer really gets to dig into Sidney's psychology in a deeper way by using Maureen's voice, by using Sidney's own voice back at her. So in conclusion, okay, so in Scream 3, she's cynical, she's darkened, she's traumatized, she's on edge. And then to release her trauma, she has to, not only confront everything that she fears, but also she has to show humility to her brother and show that all of this has not tainted her as a human being. By holding Roman's hand at the end, she releases all of that. And that's why she's able to open the gate at the end and have the happy ending. So anyways, Quentin, what do you say?
Well, this is, it's my favorite Scream film. I think the character is interesting because, again, she's in retreat in most of the film, but then that duality comes up because she's still helping people as a crisis counselor, even though it's under an alias. So that need to, that dichotomous sort of energy of wanting to be away from people, but also wanting to be among them within a certain context, but in a selfless way, speaks to both the resiliency and the fragility residing in the character. I just remember watching that film 25 years ago. I was a teenager and we rented it over the summer before we ended up buying it. And I remember just being on the edge of my seat the whole time. But what stuck with me most was Neve Campbell's performance and how she's just been through all of this trauma on top of trauma. Mm-hmm. The sins of the mother, which is the big thing hanging over. That's really what this is about, is that, and even though her mother was a victim, her mother still made very specific choices. She abandoned one child and started a family and created another one. And while we can empathize over that choice, set her and her son Roman down on the path that would have reverberating consequences for so many other different people's lives, that for her daughter and her daughter who would touch other people's lives. And seeing sort of Sidney Prescott take all of this on and come out of it with such grace at the end, with sort of her humanity intact, stronger, and with that blend, that compound of the resiliency and the fragility kind of fused, really laid the groundwork for what we would see in the next two films that she would come forward in Scream 4 and Scream 5. So it's a beautiful thing. It's almost like a release at the end. Mm-hmm. And, with the light and the fence and her dog and just her attire. And as you said, the visual cues are in step with Neve's performance. I mean, I'm always struck just by the way little things, like I think when she's in the bathroom before she ends up going onto the set and when she's looking at her hands and it shaking. As someone who's had my own struggles of social anxiety and how sometimes which I used to suffer from really bad panic attacks. And how that becomes a physical thing. And she talks to herself like, keep it together, Sid. That resonated with me even now as an adult, because I've been in those positions in my teenage years up through my young adulthood, now adulthood, where I've had that. So it's a powerful thing. And again, I think, like I said, I don't think enough credit can be given to Neve Campbell in terms of how she has humanized that character and the franchise. And it really is what, to me, makes Scream interesting. Is that it's this human interest story sort of wrapped in sort of a slasher thriller kind of horror vibe. And that's what keeps me coming back, is that part of it, the human heart.
Well, and in Scream 3, it's even more present because she is the darkest part of Scream 3. She's the most emotional part of Scream 3. She's the saddest part of Scream 3. She's the most human part of Scream 3 because she's surrounded by the rest of the film, which is a kind of really vapid Hollywood people, right?
Well, it's grandiose, and she's grounding it. She's providing that grounding factor.
And, there's also just like the, so much happens once she gets like, I've always talked about the police station as being like the Sidney Prescott moment, because that's the moment she has to choose, not only to go and save Gail and Dewey and confront this fear and kind of make that choice for herself, but it's also the moment where she realizes, okay, I can do this. I'm going to get the vest. I'm going to get the second gun, and I'm going to go kick some ass. And, it's your turn to scream, asshole. And that's what she's able to do. I think that's almost like the first wave of Sidney's character arc of Scream 3 coming to fruition. And then the second wave is kind of getting to scream at Roman. And then the third wave is defeating him and getting to hold his hand. And then we get the happy ending. That is, it's so triumphant in terms of being a final girl, and outsmarting the killer and showing the growth and showing the bravery and showing how to be a hero. I think that is something that's almost lost on films today, is how heroic Sidney is in Scream 3. Despite, all of the trauma that's messing with her, undoubtedly. Another scene that I love of Sidney in Scream 3 is the police station with Mark Kincaid. I think that's an expertly written, directed, acted, scored, edited scene. It's so beautiful. And again, that's what makes Patrick Dempsey's non-existence in Scream 7 hurt so bad, because they laid the groundwork there so well for her to be understood by somebody else. But it is what it is. But yeah, I think that for instance, that moment in the bathroom that you're talking about, with her hand shaking, talking to herself, and even just the looks that she gives as she looks underneath the stall, that they're so intense in a way that Neve couldn't have done in 1996. This is something that Sidney grew with Neve. Neve grew with Sidney, and we get the Oscar-worthy performance in Scream 3 that we get because of the opportunity, the work with Wes, but also discovering Sidney and going to those depths with her. So I just think that Sidney in Scream 3 is the masterclass of horror heroines.
I would agree. It's just, she's a consummate professional, and she approached it with care. And I think that just comes across in every frame she's in.
Yeah. So, and I think that there's just something so urgent about her story in Scream 3, emotionally, physically, that it just makes me think that, I think that's part of what happens in Scream 4, as we're going to transition now to the fourth movie. I was kind of let down by Sidney in Scream 4 for a while, because in Scream 3, she is at a 10 in terms of the tears and the trauma and what she's going through and the darkness. And in Scream 4, it's more subtle. You go from the most overt performance that Neve has ever given in Scream 3 to the most subtle in Scream 4. And that was, this performance in Scream 4, which you rank in fourth place, which we both rank in fourth place, I guess. This has been kind of the topic of debate with me. I've had people lobbying me to give Sidney more love in Scream 4, over the years, because I used to put it at the bottom. I used to actually put Scream 5 above it. And I've realized now that was incorrect. But it's, in my opinion, internalized acting at its finest. And I think I understood that Neve was doing really internalized, lived in type of acting since the moment I saw Scream 4. It just didn't feel as effective as her performances in the first three. But I have to say, it's unlike any other performance in any of the other films. It's sophisticated, it's quiet, it's almost balletic, in terms of a ballet, like the way that she moves. It's very poised. And also, the thing I've really gathered over the past year is how important of a conversation Sidney in Scream 4 is about moving beyond trauma. Sidney in Scream 3, she kind of, I don't want to say she solves her trauma or she puts her trauma to rest, but there's resolution there, and there is a wanting to move on. And I think Scream 4 is what we get once somebody does move on from trauma. It stays with her. She's haunted by it just a little bit, but it's not in control of her. She's in control of it. Overall, Sidney is just a bit more subtle in Scream 4, and I think that this conversation about moving on from trauma comes through in her conversation with Jill in the kitchen, and the way that Sidney kind of wrestles with how she deals with the day-to-day people calling her things, facing attacks, whatever it is. And she talks to Jill and she says, I just try to think about this and that's what I focus on and I let everything else happen. I think that's a really important conversation as a horror heroine. In addition to being like this figurehead of the original Final Girl, the original film. Like, Sidney is kind of the centerpiece of Scream 4 in that respect. And the thesis of the movie is don't fuck with the original. So she's almost like this symbolic, monument in a way, which also is an additive of that. So you have like Sidney as the trauma commentary, but also moving on from trauma commentary, but also this figurehead and this symbolic thing of the original. And I think that's beautiful. And I think it's underrated. And, again, going on that, both of those things, I think there's a nice conversation about Sidney and development through how she reacts to something like Olivia being killed and attacked. She throws herself into that situation in a way that I don't think that Sidney in Scream 1 could have or would have, and even like in the finale, even though she doesn't, it's the Emma Roberts show, Neve's performance in the finale when she's sitting there in the kitchen, every look kills me. I think I just want to take a gif of every single moment and expression. It's so raw and pointed and like just so Sidney, I love it, so in conclusion, it may be a bit anticlimactic compared to Scream 3, but I see such beauty and sophistication in everything Sidney Scream 4 in a way that I don't anymore for Scream 5. So Quentin, what say you?
Well, I think for me, the treat with this film was it was an unexpected surprise. I never imagined we were going to get a fourth film and getting the original cast back. What a treat. And so for me, as I say, the first word that comes to mind is polished. That mixture of resilience and fragility is still there, but there's a quiet confidence that she exudes from the moment she comes out of the car in her purple dress. There is a womanly factor. She's in command of herself. She knows who she is. She knows what she wants. And while she's had these things happen to her, they haven't defined her. And I think the thing is that it's similar. There's a parallel to 3 in that in 3, you have this grandiose setting, this grandiose plot. Sidney's grounding it. But if you extrapolate that performance and put it up against it in her singular performance in 4, it seems like 3 dwarfs it, but you have to flip it around and look at, it's the same thing. The same premise applies to Sidney and Neve's performance of her in 4, in that you have this grandiose setting in terms of it being this whole thing of bringing it to a contemporary context and having it this great backdrop of where I still think Scream 4 is actually probably the most relevant Scream film right now in terms of where we are. Like, you wouldn't have 5 and 6 without 4. You would have 7 without 4, but she's still the grounding character. And I think when we talked about other previous, Final Girls, Heather Langenkamp or Jamie Lee Curtis, and even Sigourney, who at different intervals toward the end of their run kind of become these larger than life characters. Sidney is about the realism of the character. And that again is what grounds it. And I love watching her. Like, one of my there are 2 favorite moments in the film when she's talking to Kirby. Hayden Panettiere is amazing in the film. And she's like, it's the killer's voice, or, the one from your life. Now that's hilarious, but imagine being Sidney. And I know that the character Kirby didn't mean it that way. You're making a joke about something that has been traumatic for her, that she survived. You think it's a punchline. You think it's funny.
Mm-hmm. And that's not who Sidney is.
But she kind of, there's that moment of kind of annoyance, but then she kind of smooths out.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, it's so cool, like that moment, and that this kind of applies to Sidney in Scream 4 overall, is like Sidney knows it's real. She feels it's real. Like, and the biggest thing the moment of Scream 4, in my opinion, for Neve's acting, again, I think of on a daily basis, is after Olivia is killed in Anthony Anderson comes over to her and he says, "Hey, are you okay?" And she's sitting on the floor, and Wes kind of has like a side view of her, like a profile image of Sidney in the mise-en-scène. And she says, "You should go look upstairs." And the way that her eyes flicker up as like the cops walk upstairs, it is so, so beautiful. And again, that is the realism. That's the humanity of Sidney. I think, if anything, I think this performance of Scream 4, because it's more subtle and more nuanced, I think that we see the humanity of Sidney Prescott the most in Scream 4 compared to the other films because she's dealing with such immediate trauma. Whereas in Scream 4, she's in control of the trauma and she's trying to, get better with each passing day. And I think that's it's very cool. And I think it's informed by so many line readings, like even just like Sidney existing and reacting to things. Like I think of even like the cinema club scene, reacting to what the stupid stuff that Charlie's saying, that Robbie's saying, that Gail is saying. Sidney is so human within all of that. She's the one person I think in the movie that is undeniably always, human. And the thing about like that Kirby moment that you just referenced in the police station is there's a little bit of annoyance, but like at the same time, she doesn't care. Like it's a little bit of annoyance, but
it's tempered by you watch the patience. Literally, her face shifts. Literally, like you see these emotions occurring in real time on her face. It's really a great way, just a subtle read. That's amazing.
Well, and so I just want to bring up about Scream 4. Some people have thought that Sidney is almost dormant in Scream 4, that there isn't much interesting going on with her in Scream 4, in terms of like she's at home making tea while the Stabathon's going on. And I actually do really like the scene where she's making tea. I like the set piece with Kate. I like that she gets to go through that experience with her aunt and kind of, again, she goes out to rescue Jill. I love that, someone who she's putting so much trust and faith into, someone she wants to protect in a way that it's different from protecting it's different from protecting Dewey and Gail in Scream 3. She's going to save them versus with Jill, she's just going to protect her. So I think those are two, it's a slight difference, but it is a difference. And it again goes to show the depth of Sidney in Scream 4. I don't think that it's a problem that she doesn't have as, that her making tea and kind of having a low-key time at Kate's house while the Sabathon's going on. I don't think that takes away anything from what Sidney does in terms of the Olivia set piece. Like the action there is so wild and intense. It's I actually think that Scream 4 so far, Scream 7 could prove us wrong, is the most action-packed Sidney has had. She is the stuff that goes on at Olivia's house with her falling down the steps, tumbling over Ghostface, like they're somersaulting together. And then at Kirby's house, she's literally running around the roof, flying off the roof. Like that stuff is crazy, and I think it's so cool that Neve gets these big action-packed moments in a way that like Scream, let's just be real, Scream 5 didn't give her.
Well, I think it's a show not tell. I think in most people's headcanon, we know that she's probably prepared herself, like in the same way that she had prepared herself in 3 after 2. I think a lot of people, like I said, I think every audience, Scream has many different audience facets. If you're just someone who's just into the split parts, then you're probably not going to appreciate the more subtle parts of what Neve Campbell is doing with the character. But ultimately, that's what gives the film meat. I mean, one of her best lines in the film, in the face of such utter betrayal, which lends a line that she says in 5 such weight, is when, Jill is ranting and raving like a lunatic. And she just says, "You'll slip. They always do." That sense of knowing, like, you know what? Like, fuck you. Like, I've been here before, but like, this is nothing new for me. Like, you've betrayed me. You've betrayed yourself, like your utter rank privilege to just behave this way. Like it in the face of such, like I said, arrogant psychosis and illness, like willful illness and ignorance. Just the grace of that. And then, like you said, you get these intense moments, like the one in the hospital, great, phenomenal, third act, the stairwell scene. It's a great performance. And I think, again, it's polished, it's subtle, but then it's intense. And I think, kind of like holding up like if you pick up a diamond off a table, it's going to shine. But when you really hold it up to the light, like when you sit with that film and watch, you really get to see what Neve Campbell brought to that film and what a gift that was, I think, to audiences at the time, and what she did for that franchise to take that character seriously and not play it like a trope or a stereotype.
And you really feel everything of Sidney in Scream 4. And this is, I was actually debating, do I put 4 above 2, 2 above 4? Even though I went with 2 above 4, I'm really, I'm like being pulled to do 4.
It could flip. I feel like it could alternate depending on the day.
Well, I just want to say, definitively, I'm in a much better place with Sidney in Scream 4 than I was when I started this podcast. I really see the beauty in what Neve did. I always have. I just didn't appreciate it in the way that I do now.
One other thing to mention with that, when she's dealing with Rebecca, her publicist, who's just so vile in what she's saying. And like, she's like, did you even read my book? Like, just people were just wanting to, like, all these people are wanting to profit off of her pain.
Yeah.
Or mocking or denigrating her pain or not taking it seriously throughout the entire film, whether it's on purpose or intentionally. And just to keep and maintain that grace, but then to still have that tough as nails, when she could say you're fired. She didn't want Rebecca to die, but she's like, yeah, I'm kind of done. This isn't going to work. So you're done.
Well, and the thing is, I described Sidney in Scream 2 in kind of like the stereotypical like college storyline, right? I don't see her storyline here as stereotypical. I don't see her storyline in Scream 3 as stereotypical. I think that there was creativity in kind of molding what Sidney is and what she's doing right now in her life in terms of her book, her cousin, and the reflection of her and her cousin, and the original versus the remake, and everything that we've talked about with the internalization of the performance that Neve gives. So it's a very interesting performance, and one that I cherish. And it's so cool to see her doing this, and then see Courtney Cox doing something totally wild and crazy and energetic and completely opposite of what Neve Campbell is doing. So so cool. But let's move on now to Scream 5, which is we both have it in last place so far, and I imagine that it will be last until through Scream 7. I imagine Scream 7 is going to be up there with Scream 1 and 3, but we'll see. So Scream 5, I think that it's fun because like, in a way, Sidney feels like she's alive a bit more in Scream 5. Like the time that we have with her, she does seem to like have a plan. She's pushing things into motion. She looks amazing. It's one of Sidney's best looks. I love her hair. I love her outfits. I think she's awesome. She has the look and the vibe down. And I think that the screenplay positions Sidney really well in her life in terms of, giving her the husband and the kids and like the general happiness that we feel from her in that very first scene with Dewey. And obviously she's very smart in the way that she handles Ghostface and that she's trying to stop the attacks, allegedly. She's very down to business, and again, Neve is great. I think her acting is really good. You can tell, that Neve is a woman of her craft, right? But she's great within the bounds of what she has to work with. In my opinion, Scream 5 kind of wastes Sidney. Whenever I first saw Scream 5, I was so let down because I thought the trailer was so Sidney focused and so cool. And I thought that we were really in for a treat as it pertains to Sidney. And I left Scream 5 being blown away by Gale Weathers and her arc in Scream 5. And I just felt like Sidney didn't really get to have her big moment to shine. And all of that was in the context of Radio Silence begging her to do the letter, to do the movie with the letter. Oh, Radio Silence wrote me this letter and blah, 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 blah. And like, it's like, what did she really come back for in some ways? To shoot doors? I don't know. Like, she doesn't really get a big moment in the movie and that is a bit of a letdown, especially if it is a supporting performance. It's in some ways it feels like Sidney isn't even there in a way that like that's not true for Gale and Dewey. So with all that being said, she still is really, really good. There's such beauty in all of the lines she delivers. The scene with Dewey on the phone, the morning of Dewey with Gale at the hospital, one of the best scenes ever. The stuff with Sam outside the hospital. I love it, and I love her final scene. I think that her final scene is so beautiful in terms of describing who Sidney is and positioning where she is in her life at the end of the movie. Again, Sidney doesn't really feel like she is any place different from the beginning to the end, but whatever. Neve is wonderful with the material she's given, but at the same time, you can't beat water from a rock. So, Quentin, what say you?
Well, I had a different sort of feel about her appearance in the fifth film because I just kind of had a feeling, just given the nature of what I had learned about the film going into it and just what my expectations were, I knew that she was going to be used to have a more limited range. And I say this with no disrespect to Courtney Cox, whose Gale Weathers in that film was absolutely stunning. But she may have had the flashier role. But Neve really made what she did with her character in that limited amount of time work. And I feel it builds on that polished variant of her from 4 so well. Obviously, the moment she appears on the screen, she just has that great strength. You see the duality. I like that they leaned into her age in a beautiful, they didn't shy from that. That she's beautiful, she's strong, and she's aging well, but she's someone she's a woman now. She's not a girl. And I like that they leaned into that. And I think for me, it's realistic to imagine that Sidney's character would be away. I mean, that line when she says, I have no intention of stepping foot in that town again, given what had happened with, Jill, and then obviously the death of her father off screen, there was nothing there to tie her to Woodsboro, really outside of Dewey, who she can just pick up and call, or he could come to her. But once she's there proper, from the moment she came on screen, because when she came in and her and Gail embraced, I had a tear or two. It was a very visceral I didn't expect to react as emotionally as I did in that moment, coming just off of what had happened with, David's amazing performance in the scene before. But she handles it just so well. It's one of my second favorite calls. I love, the way she talks to Ghostface, that I'm bored. It's brilliant. And it's probably the only Scream film where, at least through what I saw, because I've seen 1, 4, and 5, and 6 in the theater. When she goes over the banister, I actually said out loud in the theater, and it was very sassy kind of black gay guy. I was like, oh, damn, girl, come on, Sidney, get up, girl. But yeah, I was like, she was just so fantastic role in the amount of time she's on. When you're watching, you just can't take your eyes off of her. And I think sometimes it's not so much. I mean, we always want more. But in this instance, it was great. It wasn't about the quantity, it was about the quality. And again, the fact that Neve Campbell has such gravitas in that short amount of time, that speaks to her ability as an actress and how she respects the franchise, her cast, her directors, the writers, the fans. And I'm looking forward to them taking that Sidney of 4 and 5, especially and extrapolating on it in 7. And really getting to see where we're going to get to see that in a much broader way, especially in the context of her being a mother. I think that's going to bring a whole other layer. And I think it's going to help 5 feel like a nice, subtle, if not a bridge, then maybe a tether or a link between the two.
Well, I'm going to actually up the ante here. So I think that you can look at the original trilogy as as the arc, as the Sidney arc, right? It's the complete character thing. 4 is kind of like an epilogue in a way, an epilogue, a celebration. And then I actually would consider, then there's this break. And then I think Scream 5, depending on what happens in 7, and if we get a full trilogy exploring Sidney's life now, I think that you could look at Scream 5 and everything that happens here as almost a prologue to what we're going to see in Scream 7 once she becomes the main focus again. And we get to explore who she is as a woman and a mother now at her age, with 3 daughters, with a family, and just see how differently she acts with Ghostface and operates in this setting now. I think that we get to see the groundwork laid here. It's a very, very early prologue to what is to come. And I do want to give Radio Silence credit, for instance, that scene the moment you referenced with her running with her kids. I think that's such you want to talk about all of the show not tell things that Wes Craven did in Scream 3 in terms of depicting Sidney's life, at home, and the way that she's kind of shutting people off, and what all of the surroundings say about her. Radio Silence just depicting her as running. That shows that she's thriving, right? I love that. It's a beautiful symbolic thing to do with Sidney as the first time we see her, and the way that it builds up is very cinematic. We see her running, we see her shoes, we see her stop. We see her turnaround. That is cinema. That is so good. Again, I think that everything that Neve gets to do as an actress shows that she is just, she's sharpened her craft. She is a wonderful actress and a learned actress, despite Scream 5 not really giving her a big moment to shine like other films have. So
I would agree. I think you really wrapped it up well in terms of how you talked about the epilogue and prologue. I think that's a good way to sort of look at it almost. And so, yeah, it's going to be exciting. That part of it, I can't wait. I just want to see Neve Campbell work. And that to me, that's my main thing. That's I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with Gail and getting Courtney what she needs to have. But just seeing Neve get to see her work. I just, and at this point in her life, man, she's going to eat that film up. She's going to eat it up.
Well, so, and I just want to I know, as a way to end this discussion of Sidney, like, I love, people are kind of like, are very critical of Guy and Jamie for their writing of 5 and 6. I actually think their writing in 5 is pretty good. I've always been a fan of the script of 5 for the craft of it. And I think the best example of their writing is the line that they give Sidney to end on, which is, I'll survive, I always do. Something so simple, right? It's not necessarily the Kevin Williamson zinger. It's not necessarily what Wes Craven could have and, done if he were here. But it's something so beautiful and so poetic and so Sidney, so true to the character. It's the essence of Sidney, and the powerful. Yes, and the humility and like the way that she's kind of downplaying it, but also she's still the one who is in control and having strength, and kind of imparting a little bit of wisdom, to Sam. It's so beautiful. So I couldn't think of a better way to close Sidney here in Scream 5 within the parameters, despite missed opportunities. Like, one thing that I don't really forgive them for is like, I think that Sidney should have had a phone call with Ghostface after Dewey died. I think that would have been, if that would have existed, I would have, my tone with Scream 5 here would be a bit different. I think that there was a big moment that Sidney missed in Scream 5, and that just kind of puts 5, in the last place for me. So, Quentin, to recap, what is your Sidney ranking?
1, 3, 4, 2, 5. 4.
So you changed.
So 4 just because I really do like her in 4. But again, she's just great. It's Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott. Like it just doesn't get any better than that.
All right. Well, I wasn't able to break him with Scream 3, people. Can't believe it. I'm losing my powers. Okay, so my ranking is 3, 1, 2, 4. I'll put it like a 2-4 and then 5. So, and cheers to Scream 7. I think Scream 7 has the possibility to be, up there with Scream 3, maybe better than Scream 3. Who knows? I don't know, but I think that this is going to be one of the best Neve Campbell performances ever. I'm so excited for her. I'm excited that she gets this moment in terms of an actress, as somebody who's nurtured a role over 30 years. I think it's so cool for her. Congrats, Neve. And Neve, thank you so much for all that you've given us with Sidney Prescott as the ultimate final girl.
Scream with Ryan C. Showers is made possible by supporters like you. All copyrighted material used or referenced in this show belong to their rightful owners and made possible by the Fair Use Act.
And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
Get another beer, you want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back!